Stillborn to Life, a novella by Valerie Lynn Stevens. Chapter 4. I did not receive the formal education of most lads my age. The family line was strongly opposed to any strict formalism. I was raised upon the belief that what most considered to be righteous order was actually a crime against nature, thus a crime against the Creator of all things. And while those not within our elite circle scoffed at our accused unrefinements of virtue, we defined our caste and our inward nobility by how little we resisted the naturally inherent entropy of the human condition and experience. Forced order to us was the root of all evil, for it was, we felt, most hindering to the naturalistic process and evolution of all things. Hence, one can easily see the conflicts which such strict devotion to such a radical philosophy would stir into motion. We came to be known, sociopolitically speaking, as instinctualists. Although this particular classification of our subspeciation came from the mouths of our gentlest, most amiable, and docile enemies. But of course we, so vehemently aversive as we were to any labels or confining boundaries of mind or heart, rather preferred not to call ourselves anything. Nevertheless, whatever I did manage to learn within such an unstructured setting was strictly in the Aristotelian, or rather very real, hands-on sense. I learned the tricks of the trade of subsistence very early on. Indeed, I had honed a precocious and quite evolved maturity and shrewdness by the tender age of 6, and some of my kin would say that I had perhaps come out of the womb that way. But more so than how to pull off the basic antics of the petty common criminal, I had especially dexterously crafted my own safe dwelling from within myself and from without. The art of camouflage and evasion were edification essential for those of us new gypsies. And indeed, the older I grew and my crimes sophisticated along with my mind, the more vagabond my good conscience had increasingly become, and thus did I really have need for such skills. I committed my first murder when I was 9 years of age. It happened on a winter's day in early February. It was a day so overcast that one's shadow, even at high noon, could nary be seen, ghosting every movement, deliberate or involuntary. In retrospect, I recall at first trying to convince myself that I had killed the boy out of some pure materialistic covetousness and the shallower intent to procure the solid gold pocket watch which the lad had been bragging about having stolen off of some banker fellow. But the cold-cutting truth of the matter was, I killed him because I had the hunger and chose to feed him. I felled the young scrounger with a pocket knife, which I, being a young clip myself, had lifted from the coat pocket of one of my kin as they slept. I remember as I plunged the knife into his chest, how deftly it seemed to sink into his flesh, making no sound but for the lad's astonished sharp inward gasp and whimpering. Yet I kept twisting the knife deeper and deeper, finally leaving the boy writhing in his own urine, blood, sweat, primal fear, and encroaching death. I imagine how it must all sound so tiresomely cliché. The poor, neglected gypsy boy dancing gaily with all forms of meanery and danger, so forth and so on. Yet however commonplace in the minutiae these things might appear to be upon the surface, one rarely is so objectively far removed from such things oneself. Subjectivity and solipsism, what faithful bedfellows they make. Yet still, that small, still voice. And each fall farther from grace, a terrible horror haunting from within the deepest, most primal recesses of the soul, as one is set further and further adrift upon an indescribably isolationist island of acute exposure, vulnerability, and unbearable, wrenching paranoia. Yet it also seems to be that when the flames which engulf us in each our own private earthly hell burn long enough, hot enough, and blindingly bright enough, we often mistake malignant mutation for higher adaptation. And such earthly wanderings do indeed age one with far more rapidity than a life lived in pursuit of the wholesome and the upright. And the deterioration of the human soul, once turpitude has been granted full reign for so long, is dizzyingly rapid. And how my humanity managed to survive the horrors of my wretched condition under such squalid circumstances never ceased to strike me as nothing short of some subtly forged, nevertheless profound miracle. Yet perhaps it was hell which brought me to heaven. Perhaps we must lie with the devil before we can ever truly know God. For with each endurance through that which my wretchedness had wrought on my body, my mind, and my soul, I began to see that I was valuable to some higher force. And with time, it would become clearer and clearer to me that I was destined for works far above and beyond anything I could have ever envisaged.